He stepped from the cracked sidewalk into the muted glow of the neon drugstore sign, its red letters casting a steady pulse across damp pavement. Streetlights pooled yellow halos around him, illuminating rusted vending machines dented by passing cars. The air carried the mingled scent of gasoline and fried pies, an odd perfume for a man who used to dance beneath brighter lights. Muhammad Ali moved without haste, hands tucked into the pockets of his threadbare jacket, collar turned up against a breeze that promised rain. At the corner, a battered payphone rattled with the distant click of incoming calls, but the phone booth stood empty, a silent witness to farewells whispered and threats abandoned. Ali passed it, thumb brushing against the cool metal, remembering times when that touch meant connection to a world beyond his reach. Tonight, though, he sought nothing, only the quiet rhythm of his own steps. Several paces further, police lights stuttered against brick facades, a blue and red heartbeat thrumming in the night. Ali slowed, eyebrows knitting as he approached the source. A young black man lay face down on the asphalt, arms pinned by the booted weight of a patrolman. His jacket slipped back slightly, revealing collarbone pressed against grimy road. The lad's shoulders pumped with each trapped breath, shoulders that stared at the sky rather than the gallery of onlookers shrugging behind a chain-link fence. Ali paused at the fringes of the crowd, the soft shuffle of shoes against gravel the only soundtrack until he came fully into view. He didn't shout or draw attention. He simply stepped forward, letting his presence form a barrier between the kneeling boy and the uniform. The cop glanced up, eyes flickering from the crumpled figure to the tall man in plain clothes, and for the first time noticed the stranger's calm gaze. No one spoke. Only the wail of a distant siren threaded through the hush. The officer's hand moved reflexively toward his baton, pressing it against the man's jacket as if to say, "This space belongs to me." Ali did not flinch. He regarded the helmeted face with composed intensity, no anger, no softness, simply a steady measuring of what was right. Then came the flash, a quick swing of the baton, as abrupt and silent as a whispered command, smacked against Ali's shoulder. The strike drove him forward a step, more from shock than force. The hush deepened, pressing ears to witness the outcome. The boy on the ground stilled for a moment, confusion etched across his features. A distant observer might have thought Ali had been struck by wind, fallen debris, any natural cause. Ali straightened, pain blooming hot but contained. He looked to the officer again, lips parted slightly as if to speak a single word, then closed them. No reaction, no defense. He merely touched the spot, fingertips brushing the rim of bloodless bruise forming beneath his jacket. The officer's jaw clenched as he realized his mistake, glanced from the bleeding residue on Ali's shoulder to the impassive face above. A single man in the fringe quietly hissed for Ali to back off, but Ali did not move. He tilted his head, weight shifting evenly, and for a moment time held its breath. Then, without warning, Ali knelt, gently, deliberately, beside the youth on the road. The officer's protest died on his lips as Ali drew the younger man's chin up, eyes meeting his in shared understanding. Ali's other hand extended to steady himself, pressing into the gritty pavement to rise again. He whispered something so low that only the pinned boy could catch it, words muffled beneath wind and siren's wail. The officer stood rigid, baton lowered but ready. Ali rose to full height, and the boy, still disoriented, saw only humanity reflected in those steady eyes. The streetlights glimmered off the sweat on Ali's brow, and the furrow of his brow softened into concern. The silent exchange spoke of solidarity and guilt and a promise that violence could be held at bay. Slowly, as if drawn by an unseen cue, the crowd exhaled. Step by step, people drifted back, leaving Ali and the two figures at the scene to their own company. No camera flashed, no shouts broke the quiet. Only Ali's steady breath measured the gap between right and wrong. Finally, he rose and brushed dust from his pants. He gave the young man's shoulder a gentle pat, then met the officer's eyes one last time, steady, unwavering. Without a word more, Ali turned and passed beyond the neon glow, back into the hush of empty streets. The night closed behind him like a curtain, leaving only the faint promise that the story would remain etched in those who saw it, long after the lights flickered off. The street remained thick with tension long after Ali moved off into the darkness. Sirens receded, but each breath shared by the young man and the officer hung in the air like a held note. Behind them, the silent crowd gave way, passing under flickering street lamps that threw yellow pools onto damp pavement. A lone street vendor packed away his soft drink stand, wheels rasping against the curb as he closed for the night. The world went on. Yet here, at the edge of the scene, time seemed frozen. The officer, still gripping the nightstick, stood motionless, eyes dark pools of regret. He blinked once as though clearing mist and stared at the bruise blooming on Muhammad Ali's shoulder. The realization struck him like cold water. This was no common brawl, no run-of-the-mill tussle. One man had stepped between violence and victim, absorbing a blow meant for another. He could have struck with fury. Instead, his strike landed upon one of the greatest champions, a man accustomed to wielding power. And now, the weight of that act pressed down on him. I didn't know, the officer finally muttered, voice thick. His partner at the roadside straightened, radio in hand, searching for reassurance but finding none. The young man released his arms, rolling onto his side, face pale. He swallowed once and reached up, gingerly touching Ali's hand that had been on his chest. Ali nodded, squeezing back, eyes kind but unreadable. Several feet away, an elderly onlooker in a trench coat crossed herself silently. A teenage girl, clutching a soda cup, pressed it to her lips, swirling the cold liquid with wide-eyed fascination. No one moved to condemn. Eyes instead studied the vigil unfolding in shadows. Ali shifted, stepping over broken shards of glass from the payphone shattered by the police boot earlier. He offered a small gesture, hand extended, palm open, to the young man. The boy took it, his hand trembling. Ali helped him to his feet and patted his back before turning to the officer. The officer tucked his nightstick under one arm, head bowed. Stepping forward, he removed his badge, turning it so the metal caught a stray beam of neon light. He held it out. "For your trouble," he offered quietly, voice steadier now. Ali accepted the badge with a nod. The metal was cool, engraved with the precinct number, but it felt heavy in his palm. He tucked it into his own jacket pocket as though depositing a piece of burden into his own garment. Then he looked back at the officer and spoke softly. "Be careful who you point that at next time." The officer exhaled, pushing his cap back on his head, and flicked his gaze toward the horizon, as if sensing the dawn creeping over rooftops. He spoke once more, as though speaking to himself. "I wish I could take it back." Ali hesitated, then placed a hand on the officer's shoulder, gentle, firm, a silent absolution. The man's spine straightened, and tears sparkled briefly in his eyes. He nodded, too choked to reply. Meanwhile, the young man turned, glancing toward the silent rows of closed shops. He gathered his jacket from the curb and slipped it on, wincing at a graze on his elbow still bleeding. Ali produced a scrap of his own towel, handing it gently to the boy, who accepted it with newfound respect. "Hold this." Ali's voice was quiet yet carried across the empty street. "Use it to clean that wound. You'll be all right." The boy nodded, eyes wet, then wrapped the towel around his elbow. He offered a murmur of thanks. Ali nodded back, then took a step and disappeared around the corner. The officer remained, hat in hand, as the boy stumbled after Ali's receding figure. One by one, the final spectators drifted away, footsteps echoing against brick walls in the night. The only sounds left were the steady drip of water from a cracked fire hydrant and the distinct thrum of Ali's fading footsteps. As the night reclaimed its stillness, the story of this young man's rescue at the hands of a champion would remain unspoken in headlines, but etched forever in those who bore witness to a quiet truth emerging slowly beneath the lamplight. The clang of the gym door cut through the hum of leather-on-leather strikes. Muhammad Ali, still cloaked in the night's solemn aftermath, stepped into the old Louisville Boxing Club, the building breathing its familiar mix of sweat, dust, and varnished wood. The ring sat at the center, ropes weary but intact. Heavy bags hung like silent sentinels from rusted beams. Mirrors curved along one wall, reflecting every movement in fractured angles, reminding fighters of their own ghosts and shadows. Ali paused at the threshold, socks slipping on the scuffed hardwood floor. He scanned the sparse crowd of young trainees, boys in cut-off t-shirts and patched shorts, their gloves resting on their hips as if pondering the meaning of their own punches. The air tasted of chalk and anticipation. The faint buzz of a tape deck spilled a recorded Nat King Cole tune into the room, weaving nostalgia into sweat-laden breaths. He made his way to the open space beside the ring, nodding a greeting to the old trainer, Angelo Dundee, whose lined face lit with surprise. Dundee's hands, knuckles swollen from years of sanctioning world champions, stilled on the counter where he was measuring tape for a new champion in training. "You're here early," Dundee noted, voice soft over the music's low pulse. "Couldn't sleep," Ali replied, easing onto a stool and tying his laces. "Needed to see this place again." Inside the ring, a young fighter named Benny Cuban balanced on the balls of his feet, arms up, shadow boxing under the low glow of industrial lamps. Benny's movements were rhythmic: jab, pivot, cross, each strike a question. Ali watched quietly, recalling his own steps when he was that young. Then from the doorway, a figure emerged so unannounced that Ali caught a flicker of hesitation in his own heart. The police officer from last night. No badge, no nightstick, just the dark shape of a man out of place. The officer halted beneath a single beam, like a boxer caught between rounds, shoulders tight, eyes scanning. He nodded at Ali, an all-too-human gesture, and stepped further into the murky haze of the gym. Benny froze mid-jab, gloves still at chest level, and the other lads paused their drills. The trainer straightened, lips parting in quiet inquiry. The atmosphere rippled with uncertainty. This man wasn't scheduled, wasn't expected. He was a stranger bearing the weight of last night's wrong. Ali closed his eyes for a microsecond, centering himself on breath, on muscle memory. When he looked again, the officer's gaze met his. No anger there, only a flicker of need, perhaps for redemption or for understanding. Ali slipped off his stool, hand extending but not inviting, more a gesture of workplace courtesy than reconciliation. "You here to train?" he asked, tone calm as satin. The officer swallowed. His chest rose in a single shaky breath, just watching. Dundee stepped forward, stirring the silence. "We drill clean shots here. If you want to stay, earn your place. Otherwise—" His tone suggested that the ring, like life, had corners you couldn't shortcuts through. A trainee behind Benny dared a whisper. "That's the cop. He struck him." The boy's voice vanished in the space between a clenched punch and the exhale before a blow. Ali held up his hand. All heads turned to him. "He stays," he said, voice smooth as silk but firm as iron. Or he goes. The officer's relief flickered across his face like a match struck in darkness. Dundee nodded once and motioned toward the ropes. "Get in." A hush fell. The officer, hands twitching, climbed through the bottom rope. His boots shifted on the canvas with tentative confidence. Benny resumed his rhythm, jabs now punctuated by the officer's presence. The night storm had given way to the gym's steady certainty. Allie moved to the corner, stripped off his coat, and donned gloves. He bounced lightly, hips rolling, eyes never leaving the man who once emblazoned his shoulder with a baton blow. "First lesson," Allie said, voice low. "We fight with how we hold ourselves, not with anger." He nodded at the officer to mirror him. "Keep your guard up." The officer raised his gloves uncertainly, stance awkward but earnest. Allie advanced, steps measured, jabs popping. The officer responded with clumsy blocks, parrying sheepishly. The pads in Allie's hands cracked with every tap, each repetition a lesson in trust. As Ali threw a feint and feinted again, the officer flinched, not from pain, but from the realization that each strike was meant to teach, not punish. Around them, the gym's old ghosts watched. Dundee circled with a towel, ready to mop sweat or tears. Benny resumed his shadow boxing, ducks and rolls echoing with purpose. Foot lockers sat open, revealing worn canvases and boxing boots laced but untied, as though awaiting heroes and witnesses. Round after round, Allie guided the cop through basic combinations. Jab cross, uppercut hook, pivot press, no roars, no spikes of adrenaline, only the steady rhythm of lesson and response. The officer's gaze centered on Allie's gloves, mirroring the dance he once interrupted with a baton strike. When the session ended, Allie removed his gloves carefully and stepped back. "Enough," he said. The officer's shoulders slumped, relief visible. They exchanged a nod deeper than words. Allie unwrapped tape from his knuckles and offered the tape roll to the officer. "Use this for protection," he said. The officer shook his head, but accepted it, tucking it into his jacket. Allie turned to Dundee. "Keep the place open," he said. "Anyone can learn in here." The trainer's eyes glistened with pride. The barbell clanked as a new trainee entered, eager, gloves already swinging. Leaving the ring, the officer paused under the doorframe. He found Allie checking his hand wraps, nodding once as though assuring himself that even bruises could heal. The cop stepped out into the corridor, shoulders lighter, steps more sure, unseen by the bright ring lights. Allie watched him go, silhouette fading into the lamplight's glow. The gym's door swung closed with a resonant thunk. Inside, in the half-light, Ali picked up the gloves he had laid aside, placed them on the stool, and whispered into the quiet, "That's what it means to stand up." The old building creaked in acknowledgement, the echoes of a night's fistfight giving way to a dawn of understanding. The gym's fluorescent tubes buzzed like restless bees, their harsh hum sliding along the walls and tumbling across the cushioned floor. Muhammad Ali stood beneath their glare, arms folded loosely at his sides. The ring, pale canvas stretched taut between four battered posts, loomed empty, ropes slack from the night's earlier exertions. In place of cheering fans, the only spectators were cracked mirrors, their frames lined with yellowed tape and scratched glass that had witnessed decades of punches and triumphs. Ali leaned against the bottom rope, his jacket draped over one corner stool, lace-up boots still on his feet. He closed his eyes against the strobing light, inhaling the familiar scent of old leather and the faint tang of sweat washed down by the morning's residual mist. In the silence, he heard drips from a broken shuffleboard along the wall and the scrape of broom bristles as a grinder operator swept the far corner. The gym was waking, but not yet alive. He checked his watch, barely past dawn. 72 hours had passed since he'd taken a baton blow meant for a stranger, and every moment since had been governed by the echo of that crack. Now he waited, posture unhurried, for the next actor in this tale. He did not need to look. He sensed movement behind him. A pair of footsteps approached the ring, tapping against the wood like tiny drums of purpose. The officer appeared in the doorway, hands tucked into the pockets of a threadbare windbreaker rather than uniform pockets. His hat was gone, replaced by hair graying at the temples. He paused at the lip of the ring, shoulders squared but head bowed, as though bracing for judgment. The chin roped by regret, he surveyed the vacant seats, rows of scrubbed benches and steel lockers, before settling his gaze on Ali. The silence stretched taut, then slowly loosened as the officer took a step forward. "I'm not here to apologize," he said, voice low and unadorned. "Just something's left from that night." Ali's gaze shifted beneath half-lidded eyes. He said nothing, waiting for this man to weigh the meaning of his confession. The officer's boots scuffed against the mats as he climbed through the bottom rope, landing lightly beside Ali. He glanced at the ring's corner where a white towel hung silent and still. Then he locked eyes with Ali. The champion finally spoke. "What scares you more?" he asked quietly. "Me or yourself?" A subtle tremor passed through the officer's frame. He inhaled, breathing ragged. "All my life," he admitted, "I've feared men like you." He looked away, scanning the faded banners overhead, commemorations of title fights and bygone champions. "Not because of your skin," he continued, voice catching, "but because of your spirit. My father, he taught me that softness is weakness. He thought a man should never yield." Images flickered through Ali's mind. His own father's gentle hands, smoothing the rough edges of bag gloves during childhood, whispering lessons of respect and courage. Ali nodded once, a small imprint of understanding. He realized then that this man's struggle mirrored countless battles fought outside the ropes, where the opponent was self-doubt, and the hardest bout was to let go of taught brutality. No words came from Ali's lips. Instead, he moved to the row of lockers along the back wall. His jacket slid from his shoulder, revealing the bare straps of worn hand wraps beneath. He opened a locker and withdrew an aged pair of boxing gloves, the leather soft as a promise and yet scarred with countless impacts. Ali held them out, palms up. "Take these," he said simply. "Let's see what you do with them tomorrow." The officer's eyes widened. He reached out, fingers brushing the glove's creases. Ali watched him, silent and steady, as though granting permission to rewrite a lifetime of mistakes. The man clutched the gloves to his chest, folding them as though they were sacred objects rather than worn equipment. A faint shift echoed behind them, training dummies swaying in the corner, ropes swishing as the morning paper boy delivered a stack to the front desk. The world was stirring, but within these walls, something new had taken hold. The possibility that power need not assert itself with force, but could flourish through quiet resolve. The officer tucked the gloves into his jacket. He looked up, meeting Ali's gaze once more. No words passed between them, but in that shared look lay acceptance and unspoken gratitude. He turned away, stepping back through the ropes and out of the ring, gloves pressed to his side like a newborn truth. Ali remained seated on the stool, unwrapping tape from his knuckles with deliberate care. He let the ends fall to the floor, then tied his jacket around his waist as if girding himself for the day's work. He listened to the gym's awakening, the creak of the ropes being tightened, the scuff of trainers on the mats, the faint hum of voices calling each other to stations. Before stepping down himself, Ali looked to the empty corners and high windows, light slicing through a haze of dust motes. He breathed deep, as if inhaling from a new well of resolve, one born from an encounter that transcended blows and bruises. With that, he leaned forward, tied his gloves once more, and climbed into the ring to begin another lesson, one that spoke of mercy as thoroughly as of might. Weeks later, the gym felt as quiet as a library when Muhammad Ali stepped through its doors one late afternoon. The echo of jump ropes and mitts striking pads had faded, replaced by the steady hum of downshifted fluorescent lights. The ring, once host to a desperate duel, now sat empty, its canvas faintly stained by the sweat and tears of countless fighters. Along the far wall, children with oversized gloves practiced slips and rolls under the watchful eye of an old trainer, their breaths measured and meticulous. Ali paused at the entrance, surveying the hall with a soft nod. His eyes lingered on the battered scoreboard. Its numbers faded, then swung to the rows of lockers, each tagged with names of those who had passed through. Frankie Burns, Tony James, and now someone new, someone who wasn't a boxer but had left his mark. A folded dark blue uniform lay draped over one locker's hook, the badge of a man who once wore steel on his belt and heavy boots on unforgiving streets. The next moment, a boy and a woman entered together, distinct figures against the gym's drab backdrop. The boy, tall and lean for his age, carried himself with cautious eagerness. His mother, shoulders hunched under a light cardigan, flinched at each strike of a speed bag, as though learning to breathe again. Ali recognized her immediately, the mother of the young man who had fallen under a cop's nightstick months ago. He had returned her son's voice and the boy's right to stand tall, but Ali hadn't forgotten the family left to pick up the pieces. At Ali's silent gesture, the trainer stepped aside and let the boy approach the ring. The mother stood quietly by the door, tears glistening in her eyes, as though she could hardly believe the place had welcomed her family once more. Ali climbed the 4 steps into the ring, every movement precise and deliberate. The boy's gaze locked onto those steps, as if finding courage in each ascent. Ali extended his hand, then reached down and picked up that dark blue uniform from the locker hook. He climbed out of the ring and handed it to the boy with the reverence one might offer a cherished heirloom. The fabric was heavy and stiff, places where metals had once gleamed faintly under street lamps. The boy held it awkwardly at the shoulders, the uniform 2 sizes too big, but his grip was firm. Without a word, Ali motioned toward the ring and beckoned the boy to climb inside. The mother stood at the foot of the steps, an uncertain smile forming as the boy, trembling yet determined, hoisted himself up. Ali took a step back and unwrapped the blue gloves from his own shoulder bag, placing them on the corner stool in front of the boy. He unwound the tape and offered the boy a pair, sporting the same shade of blue on the leather. Ali's eyes were calm as he spoke softly. 2 things, kid. Respect and responsibility. He nodded toward the gloves and then toward the young fighter. Put these on only when you're ready to face what's in front of you, on the canvas and in life. As the boy laced the gloves with trembling fingers, the mother wiped her face, relief and pride mingling in her expression. The gym's other pupils paused, captivated by the ceremony unfolding. The trainer set aside his towel and descended into the ring, guiding the boy through gentle footwork, side steps, pivots, and basic jabs, all performed while wearing the oversized uniform. The boy's second punch caught Ali's outstretched pad, a small crack of confidence echoing in the empty hall. Ali stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "You carry more than cotton cloth now," he said quietly. "You carry hope." The boy nodded, eyes bright above the caked tape and straps. Outside, the mother's phone buzzed, a news alert about another late-night arrest, another family torn. She tucked it away, refusing to look. Instead, She watched her son find his rhythm under Ali's watchful eye, learning that a uniform could symbolize not fear or corruption, but a chance to rebuild, to choose courage over instinctive force. After several minutes of steady practice, the boy lowered his gloves and turned to face Ali directly. He removed the uniform's jacket and handed it back, letting it fall in a neat fold on the canvas. Then, without hesitation, he stepped off the ring and placed the uniform gently on the locker's hook, exactly as he found it, a silent promise that he would wear it someday for the right reasons, not the wrong ones. Ali offered the boy a dark nod and clapped lightly. "You did good," he said. The trainer stepped in, enveloping the boy in a proud smile. The mother approached, wrapping her son in a gentle embrace. Ali withdrew to the corner, eyes reflecting the soft glow of the gym's lights, knowing this small act of transformation would echo far beyond these walls. As he gathered his robe and gloves, Ali felt the gym's heartbeat quicken again, young fists lightly tapping pads, ropes swaying as another youngster shadow boxed. The space pulsed with renewed life, a living testament to what could happen when someone chose mercy over might. Ali stepped from the ring, each footfall a cadence in a new story, one about a uniform left behind and a chance seized in its stead. He arrived at the gym just as the last of the morning light died beyond the high windows, leaving only the steady hum of overhead fluorescents. The scent of aged leather and salty sweat clung to the air, reminding everyone who trained here of battles fought and lessons earned. Muhammad Ali lingered at the threshold, boots scuffing the well-worn mat, scanning the empty rows of folding chairs that usually welcomed spectators. Today, the only audience he would have was the steel link fence he'd chosen over crowds. A familiar, hesitant footstep echoed behind him. The former officer stepped into the ring area without uniform or badge, carrying nothing but the weight of reawakened guilt. His hands, once calloused by baton and paperwork, trembled at his sides. He paused at the edge of the ropes, looking for a place to start in the silence. Ali continued to adjust the wraps on a young fighter's gloves, his movement sure and unhurried, each wrap a knot of respect and protection. He sensed the officer's presence, but did not turn. Instead, he finished the last twist of tape, patted the boy's knuckles, and stepped back, allowing the officer the floor. When Ali finally spoke, his voice was neither gentle nor accusing, but an invitation. "You didn't come to say you're sorry," he observed, his tone even. The man's shoulders stiffened, as though he'd been caught in an unspoken secret. "Then why are you here?" The officer swallowed hard, blinking against the harsh light. He ran a hand through his hair, single strand sliding loose. "Something didn't end," he said, voice low. "That night, I thought I had handled it, but the memory just lingers." He surveyed the empty ring, the silent canvas, as though expecting last night's phantom pain to step back through those ropes. Ali stepped closer. The young fighter lingered in the corner, watching the exchange with wide eyes. Sweat glistened on his brow from earlier drills, a reminder that only action teaches more than words. Ali tapped the center of the ring with one boot. "Fear," he said, "doesn't wash away on its own. You've got to face it." The officer exhaled sharply. "All my life, I was taught that softness is weakness," he confessed. "My dad, he wore a badge. He carried authority. He told me that to survive, you had to strike first. Never let them think you care." His hand clenched at his side as he spoke, knuckles turning white. "But striking him. I felt it afterwards. Not anger, but emptiness." Ali nodded, taking in every detail. The arresting silver streak in the man's hair, the hesitant clench of his jaw, the fine tremble in his fingers. He realized that this was a confession not for absolution, but for understanding. To meet guilt with more violence would be to repeat the same cycle. Without turning, Ali raised his arm and retrieved two pairs of gloves from a stool. One was fresh and still wrapped in plastic. The other was his own, softened by countless fights. He placed them on the canvas between himself and the officer. "Put these on," he said quietly. "Not to fight me or anyone else, just to learn how to stand your ground without hurting." The officer stared at the gloves, shock and gratitude swirling in his gaze. He stepped into the ring, ropes brushing against his jacket, and bent to pick them up. His hands trembled as they slid into the finger slots, the leather a snug sheath that felt strangely protective. He flexed his knuckles once, then twice, as though checking for a pulse. Ali moved to the opposite corner and placed a hand on the top rope. "No sparring," he stated firmly. "Just practice. Step and jab, step and block. Move as you breathe. Build your strength from stillness." In the ring center, the officer found his stance, feet planted shoulder-width apart, hands held up in a defensive guard, not ready to strike, but ready to endure. Ali nodded, then called out a simple rhythm, 1-2, 1-2. The officer followed, gliding forward with caution, tapping a left jab and a right cross, a slow dance in an empty auditorium. Their breaths synced, raspy in the quiet air. The officer's glove cracked lightly against Ali's open palm, each tap a confession transformed into motion. Ali guided the pace, never accelerating beyond the officer's comfort, yet always gently pushing him to extend further. Around them, the gym seemed to exhale, the echoes fading into a steady pulse of possibility. Minutes passed like hours, the officer's arms growing stronger, stance firmer. When Ali finally called a halt, the man lowered his gloves and exhaled, a long, shuddering release. He looked at Ali, eyes glistening behind beads of sweat. "I understand now," he said, voice thick. "I can stand without striking." Ali stepped forward, offering a firm pat on the officer's shoulder, not a gesture of approval, but of shared humanity. The lesson had been taught without a blow, without anger, without a single shouted command. It had been taught in patient repetition, grounded in the simple truth that to be unarmed in the ring is often the bravest fight of all. As the officer climbed out of the ropes, he left the gloves behind, placing them neatly on the corner stool. Ali watched him go, the chain of past guilt broken, if only in this space at this moment, with a quiet act of persistence. The gym lights buzzed on, hurrah-like, and the next group of fighters filed in, ready to face their own battles. And for a moment, the story of last night felt like a distant dream, replaced by the enduring reality that power tempered by compassion can change the shape of a life.